I need to check the list of used names before writing. The band names are Maya, Derek, Cassandra, Owen, Natalie, Gerald, Priya, Diane, Serena, Constance, Lena, Ada, Theo, Vivienne, Claire, Rosalind, Felicity, Brandon, Leonard, Nora, Raymond, Marguerite, Bethany, Marcus, Petra, Iris, Elaine, Hazel, June, Harriet, Simone, Cora, Walter, Tessa, Gwen, Ruth, Dominic, Felicia, Zoe, Bex, Holloway, Hargrove, Adebayo, Carver, Whitfield, Okafor. New names. I'll use Lydia, narrator, Colin, husband, Ren, best friend, Arthur, brother-in-law/Lori. Contact, Pauline, mother-in-law. Let me verify. None of these are in the band list. I put $540,000 into my husband's restaurant group, every dollar. My savings, my inheritance from my grandmother, and a small business loan I took out in my own name. I want you to understand that before anything else, before the part where he called me from the parking lot of his own grand opening to ask why I hadn't wired the monthly operating transfer yet, before the part where I found out the ribbon cutting had happened 3 weeks earlier and I hadn't been invited, before all of it, I need you to know that the money was real, the sacrifice was real, and for a long time, so was my love for him. His name is Colin. We met when we were both 26, at a mutual friend's birthday dinner at this tiny Italian place in Chicago that's since closed down. He was charming in that specific way that feels rare when you're young. He actually listened. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered what you'd said 10 minutes ago and looped back to it. I remember thinking, this person is paying attention to me like I'm worth paying attention to. That sounds small. It wasn't small to me then. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, and married when I was 29. I was working in hotel operations management at the time, decent salary, good benefits, a career I'd actually built from the ground up, starting as a front desk associate at 22. Colin had been bouncing between ideas for years. A food truck, a catering company, a pop-up concept. None of them had really launched. He had passion and he had taste and he genuinely understood food in a way that was beautiful to watch. He just struggled with the execution side. The business side. The boring, unglamorous, spreadsheet side. That's where I came in. I don't say that with bitterness. I want to be honest. I came in willingly. I believed in him. More than that, I believed in us as a team. He had the vision and the culinary credibility, and I had the operational background and the financial discipline. It made sense on paper. It made sense on my heart. When he finally landed on the concept, a mid-upscale American bistro with a rotating seasonal menu, the kind of place that fills a real gap in the market, I was the one who sat down with the numbers and said, okay, this could actually work. The initial plan was a partnership. We'd both be listed as co-owners. I would handle operations and finances, he would handle kitchen and concept. Simple, clean. What I didn't realize at the time was that listed as co-owners and legally protected as co-owners are two very different things. And I was too trusting, too in love, and honestly too busy doing all the actual work to stop and make sure the paperwork matched the dream. I sold a condo I'd owned since I was 24. That was $210,000 after fees. My grandmother passed when I was 27 and left me $180,000, money she'd saved her entire working life, money she specifically told my mother she wanted me to use for something that's really mine. I used $150,000 of it. I took out a business loan for $180,000 in my name, with my credit, backed by my employment history. That's how we got to $540,000. Colin contributed his restaurant equipment, his existing supplier relationships, and what he described as sweat equity. He would later tell his mother this meant he contributed everything that actually mattered. The first year was hard in the way that new businesses are always hard, but it was also genuinely exciting. We were building something. The restaurant opened in the spring, got a favorable write-up in a local food blog, and by summer we had a regular weekend crowd. Colin was in his element behind the scenes, working with the chefs, tweaking the menu, charming the regulars. I was the one negotiating with vendors, managing payroll, tracking cash flow, handling the lease renewal. I was also still working part-time at the hotel group because we couldn't yet afford to pay ourselves properly. I was tired all the time. But I was happy. Or I thought I was. The shift happened gradually, the way these things usually do. Colin started pulling back from the logistical side of things, which I understood, it wasn't his strength. But he also started pulling back from including me in the creative side. Decisions about the menu refresh, about new hires for front of house, about a potential second location he was apparently scouting. I'd find out about things after the fact, not in a dramatic way at first, just in a quiet, accumulating way that I kept telling myself was normal for a busy entrepreneur. Then his mother moved to Chicago. Her name is Pauline, and I want to be fair here because I know how mother-in-law stories can sound. I tried, genuinely, to have a good relationship with her. When she first visited, I cooked for her. I included her in conversations. I drove her to her doctor's appointment when Colin was stuck at the restaurant. She wasn't warm toward me, but she wasn't openly cruel either. I chalked it up to personality differences. What I didn't know, in those early months of her being around, was what she was saying to Colin when I wasn't there. I found out later, from my friend Ren, who had dinner with Colin's cousin at some point, that Pauline had been telling Colin for over a year that the restaurant should be in the family. That I was an outsider. That if things went sideways in our marriage, I could take half. That he needed to protect himself. Her exact words, as relayed to Ren, were, "She's an employee, not a founder." She said that about me. About the person who sold her home to fund this thing. But I didn't know any of this yet. Not when I was still wiring operating transfers every month. Not when I was still the one on the phone with the bank at 7 in the morning sorting out a payment processing issue. Not when I designed the entire catering inquiry system that ended up bringing in almost $90,000 in private event bookings that first full year. The grand opening of the second location. That's where everything cracked open. Colin had been talking about expanding for about 8 months. We'd discussed it together, loosely, and I'd run preliminary numbers that showed it was feasible if we waited another 6 to 8 months and let the first location's cash flow stabilize. He said he agreed. He said he wanted to be patient about it. He said a lot of things. What he was actually doing during those months was moving forward without me. I found out about the second location's grand opening the way you find out things you were never supposed to know, accidentally. Ren texted me a photo. She'd been walking past a neighborhood she doesn't usually go to, and saw balloons and a banner outside a restaurant with our name on it. Our name. The same branding, the same logo I'd spent hours working on with the designer, the same color palette. She thought I was there, and texted to say she was outside. Did I want to come say hi? I was at home, in our apartment, doing his quarterly tax prep. I sat with that for a minute. Then I called him. He picked up on the third ring and the background noise was unmistakable. A crowd, music, the particular ambient buzz of a room full of people having a good time. I asked him where he was. He paused for just a beat too long, and then he said, "At the restaurant, there's a soft launch thing." "A soft launch," I said. "Yeah, it's low key, just some people." "What people?" Another pause. "Family. A few of the investors." I asked him what investors. He told me he'd brought in outside investors for the second location to keep things cleaner. When I asked what that meant, he said it meant he wanted the expansion to have its own structure, separate from the original. When I asked why I wasn't told about this, he said I had been, that we'd talked about it. When I said we had never talked about outside investors replacing my operational role, he said, "You're still involved in the first location. Still involved. In the thing I built." As a courtesy, I hung up. I didn't cry right away. I actually sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened the shared financial folder where I kept all our business documents, and that's when I found it. Or rather, found the absence of it. The operating agreement for the second location, which Colin had apparently been drafting with an attorney for 4 months, listed him as the sole founding owner. There were 3 outside investors. I was not named anywhere. Not as an owner, not as an officer, not even as a consultant. But the loan. The $180,000 business loan was still in my name. Because of course it was. I called my friend Ren that night and talked for 2 hours. She's the kind of friend who doesn't tell you what you want to hear. She tells you what you need to hear, and she does it without making you feel stupid for not having seen it sooner. She said very calmly, "You need to talk to someone before you confront him directly. Like a lawyer. Tonight, if possible." She knew someone. Her brother-in-law, Arthur, who handled commercial litigation and had done some family business dispute work. He wasn't technically a family law attorney, but he knew enough to get me oriented, and he knew who to refer me to. Ren called him at 10:30 at night and he picked up, because that's the kind of person he is. I talked to Arthur for 45 minutes on the phone. He asked me a lot of questions I wasn't fully prepared for. Questions about documentation, about what was in writing, about whether my name appeared on the original business registration. The answers were not all good, but some of them were better than I expected. My name was on the original LLC as a 50% member. That hadn't been changed. The loan was in my name and could be documented as a capital contribution. I had email trails, years of them showing my operational involvement, financial decisions, vendor negotiations, and critically, Arthur flagged something I hadn't even thought about. If Colin had used funds from the original LLC to seed the second location's startup costs before bringing in outside investors, that was a potential breach of fiduciary duty to me as a co-member. "Don't move any money," Arthur said. "Don't transfer anything. Don't change anything. And don't let him know you've spoken to anyone yet." I didn't sleep that night. Colin came home around midnight. He was in a good mood. The soft launch had gone well, apparently. He came into the bedroom, saw I was awake, and said, "Hey, we should talk about the expansion stuff. I know earlier was a lot." I said, "Sure, let's talk tomorrow." He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm fine. I'm just tired." He said okay and went to wash up. And I lay there in the dark thinking about my grandmother, about the $150,000 she saved her whole life, about what she said when she gave it to me, something that's really mine. I thought about the condo I sold. I thought about every 7 a.m. phone call with the bank, every vendor negotiation, every weekend I'd skipped because I was doing payroll. I thought about the word employee. Over the next 2 weeks I was very quiet and very busy. Arthur connected me with a family law attorney named, well, I'm not going to share her name, but she was extraordinarily good. She reviewed everything, confirmed that my membership interest in the original LLC was intact and enforceable, and identified 2 specific financial transfers that Colin had made from the original business account to the second location startup fund without my knowledge or consent. Total $67,000. That was actionable. She also helped me understand something about the loan, because it was in my name and I'd never been compensated for it as anything other than an informal investment. No promissory note, no formal capital contribution agreement. It could be argued either way. But the email record strongly supported my position. Colin had sent me emails referencing your loan and the money you put in. And we need to keep Lydia's. He referenced my contributions explicitly, multiple times in writing. I hadn't realized how much documentation I'd quietly been building just by doing my job. The moment I decided I was done, truly done, not I'm hurt and processing done, but actually structurally done, was a Tuesday afternoon. Colin called me. He was at the second location dealing with a contractor issue and he needed me to authorize a wire transfer from the original business account to cover an overage. He explained it quickly, casually, like it was routine. Like I was an administrative function he was accessing. I asked him to send me the invoice. He said he would later. I said I needed it before I could authorize anything. He got impatient. He said, "Can you just do it?" "It's fine. I'll explain everything later. We're in the middle of something here." I said, "The original account is jointly controlled. I'm not authorizing transfers without documentation. If you need funds for the second location, you should ask your investors." Silence. Then, "What? You have investors," I said. "That's what they're for. I'm a 50% member of the original LLC, and I'm not releasing funds without a paper trail." He said, "What are you talking about?" "Lydia," he started, and then caught himself. "Wait. Sorry." He started to say my name. He used my name. I hadn't meant to slip that in. I don't usually share my name in these videos. What I'll say is that he used my name slowly, the way people do when they're recalibrating. When they realize the dynamic has changed and they're not sure yet how. "We can talk when you're home," I said. "Get the invoice to me first." I hung up. He came home 2 hours later with an energy I recognized. Not anger exactly, but a kind of pre-anger, the coiling up version. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and he said, "I feel like you've been weird for 2 weeks and I don't know what's going on." I said, "I know about the $67,000. The color changed in his face. Not dramatically, he wasn't a dramatic person. But something shifted. He went very still. "I know it came from the joint account," I said. "I know it went to the second location's contractor deposits before your outside investors had fully funded in. That's my money, Colin. That's half my money. And you moved it without telling me." He started to explain. He said he planned to pay it back, that it was a timing issue, that the investors were always going to cover it. I listened to all of it. And then I said, "Your mother called me an employee. Did you know that?" He didn't answer. "I sold my condo," I said. "I used my grandmother's money. I took out a loan in my name that I am still personally liable for. I did the payroll, the vendor contracts, the tax filings, the catering bookings that made us $90,000 last year. And I wasn't invited to your grand opening because I'm not close family." He said, "It wasn't like that." Then what was it like? He didn't have an answer. He tried a few. They didn't hold. "I'm not shutting down the restaurant," I said. "I'm not here to blow everything up, but I am retaining my 50% interest in the original LLC, and I am filing a formal claim for the $67,000 that was transferred without my consent. And I am removing myself as the personal guarantor on the expansion loan, which I should never have been quietly added to, by the way." Yes, I know about that too. He had added me as a secondary guarantor on one of the second location's financing documents, without telling me. Without asking me. There was my signature. My signature, which I had not signed, on a document I'd never seen. That was the part that broke whatever remaining benefit of the doubt I was extending. Not the grand opening, not the investors, not even the $67,000. It was seeing my name on a line I'd never touched. I put the copy of the document on the table between us and I didn't say anything. I just let him look at it, and look at it, and look at it. He said, "I can explain that." I said, "You should explain it to my attorney. I want to tell you where things stand now, because I know that's what you're waiting for, and honestly it's what kept me going through the worst of it, the knowledge that there would eventually be a now." We separated 4 months after that conversation. The divorce proceedings are ongoing and I'm not going to get into the specifics for obvious reasons, but here's what I will tell you. My membership interest in the original LLC is not in dispute. My attorney was very clear that the documentation supported my position, and Colin's own legal team advised him not to contest it. The $67,000 transfer has been acknowledged and is being addressed as part of the broader settlement. And the signature on that financing document, which was not mine, is the subject of a separate conversation that I'll leave at that. The restaurant is still open. I'm still a 50% owner. I'm not involved in day-to-day operations right now, and honestly, that's fine with me. There are good people running it. The general manager who I hired and trained has kept things steady. Colin's second location is struggling. I heard through someone we both know that 2 of the 3 outside investors have pulled back. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it with a kind of sad recognition. All of that, and the version he tried to build without me isn't doing as well as the version we built together. There's something I've been turning over a lot lately, something Ren said when I was in the middle of the worst of it. When I was crying in her kitchen at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday eating cereal because neither of us had eaten real food. She said, "You weren't naive, you were generous." Those aren't the same thing, and you shouldn't let him rewrite it into stupidity. I've held on to that. Because there were so many moments in the attorney meetings, in the mediation sessions, in the quiet of my apartment after Colin moved out, where I felt embarrassed, like I should have protected myself better, like I should have had a sharper instinct for what was happening. And maybe that's partially true. I've learned things about business agreements and documentation I will carry for the rest of my life. But I also know this. I believed in something real. I worked hard. I contributed in ways that are documented and measurable and undeniable. The fact that someone tried to quietly erase that doesn't mean I was foolish to build it in the first place. It means they knew what it was worth, and they didn't want me to know they knew. If you've made it to the end of this, I'm guessing something in here felt familiar. Maybe not the details, maybe it's not a restaurant, maybe it's not a marriage, but that feeling of realizing that the version of events someone else has been carrying around is completely different from yours. The feeling of being essential and invisible at the same time. You're not crazy. You were paying attention. And if you're in the middle of it right now, please, talk to someone before you move anything, sign anything, or confront anyone directly. Get your documentation together. Know what you have. You probably have more than you think. There's something nobody warns you about when you're in the middle of building something real. How invisible the unraveling can be. It doesn't come with an announcement. It comes in small, quiet edits. A decision made without you. A document you never saw. A signature that isn't yours. I've thought a lot about why Colin did what he did. Not in an obsessive way. Not anymore. But in the way you turn something over when you're trying to actually understand it rather than just survive it. And what I keep coming back to is this. He didn't wake up one morning and decide to betray me. It happened gradually, probably even to himself. He got comfortable with a version of events where he was the visionary and I was the support system. And once you get comfortable with a story, you start making choices that protect it. That's not a defense of him. It's just what I think happened. And understanding it has actually been more useful to me than anger, because anger keeps you focused on the other person. Understanding lets you focus on yourself. What I know now that I didn't know at 29 is that generosity without documentation is just hope. And hope is not a legal instrument. I loved Colin. I believed in what we were building. I gave everything I had, financially, operationally, emotionally, and I gave it freely because I thought that's what you do when you're building a life with someone. You show up. You don't keep score. But there's a version of not keeping score that slides, almost without noticing, into not protecting yourself. And those two things are not the same. Being generous is a virtue. Being willfully unprepared is something else, and I had to sit with my part in that, not to blame myself. I want to be clear about that, but to understand it well enough that I never repeated. The emails I'd sent over 3 years, the vendor contracts with my name on them, the loan documents, the tax filings. I hadn't been building a legal case. I'd just been doing my job, carefully, because that's how I do things. And it turned out that doing your job carefully, thoroughly, consistently, that's its own kind of protection. Not because you're anticipating betrayal, but because integrity leaves a record. Colin's second location is struggling. When I heard that, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. What I felt was something quieter and more complicated. A recognition that the thing he tried to build alone, without the operational foundation, without the structure I'd spent years creating, couldn't hold its own weight. That's not karma in any cosmic sense, it's just consequence. Choices have structures, and structures either hold or they don't. Ren told me once, during one of those late nights when I wasn't sure how I was going to get through the next morning, that the goal wasn't to come out of this harder. The goal was to come out of it wiser and still soft enough to build something again someday. I think about that a lot. Because the easiest thing, after something like this, is to close up. To decide that trust is a liability and vulnerability is stupidity. And I understand that impulse completely, but I don't think that's the right answer. I think the right answer is to stay generous and get serious about the paperwork.